Human Acts, a novel by KANG. Gruesome details. This should be allowed for people over like 11 years old according to the American age. But for now, let's just start with Human Acts. Human Acts and KANG by KANG. Hi guys, and welcome to a new episode of the channel, and today we will be talking about Human Acts by KANG, the South Korean author KANG. To have a we get started. Now, it's pretty much obvious why we call it Human Acts, because it's just gonna talk about being human, yeah, all those stuff. Well, truly, it is going to. However, not the way we might think of it. There's a lot of things that we can do when we think about this stuff, but as we know, it's happened pretty much early. Now, each chapter over here is in a specific year. So chapter 1 is in 1980, chapter 2 is in 1982, also 1980, chapter 3 is in 1985, and chapter 4 there's 1990, chapter 5 there's 2002, and all the way to the epilogue in 2013, which is when the book was written and published, I believe. Well, it was written then, and it just seems to happen that there's a lot of things that can seem to happen in this. And it turns out that this book is based on, like, between those times during the Guangzhou Uprising. And here is a photo of the Guangzhou Uprising. Now, this is in Korean. All the states' names are in Korean, so I'll show you just where it is. Just a minute, I need to point here. This little isolated red place is Guangzhou. Even though you might not be able to read it, it's actually Guangzhou. And there was protests of students and stuff. And the president of South Korea back then was like, "Nah, I hate these some stuff." Like, this is just a little exaggeration here and a bit simplified, but anyways, we're just gonna get back to it. Anyways, the president didn't like all these protest stuff, and so he just blamed them on the North Korean people and started killing people there. Also, he blocked travel there, and this was only inside the news of Guangzhou, so nobody else in Korea knew about it until the president sort of went away. After a line of presidents, there was like some, and then the secret was released from Guangzhou all the way to the rest of Korea. And so that's about it. And then the Guangzhou Uprising stopped, sort of. And then things got complicated, so complicated in fact that I'm just gonna say here we're not gonna explain all of that in this video. And Human Acts, I watched a few videos already, and Human Acts, but KANG said that, well, she wrote this because, well, about the Guangzhou Uprising, because not only about the Guangzhou Uprising, but also about being human. Like, what's it to being human? I mean, there's a lot of conflict between South and North Korea. That is true, but even so, with all those things, there should still be a little peace here. I mean, why blame all those on North Korea when you don't actually have proof? Now, somebody could have said that to the president, but then the president would have got him killed or something. But that doesn't really matter now, because that actually seems pretty obvious to a lot of people. I mean, the president might have already noticed that, but he might just been too stupid to actually know that, hey, let's just get this done and tell his generals the lies. And eventually, that's pretty much what happened. There was... Before we start, again, I just want to say here that the president's name we're talking about is Chun Do-hwan. And I said it in a Korean accent, so I'm guessing you guys would say, alright, who is this guy? Well, just Google him. And it's pretty much like that. Back to where we started. So, where were we? Oh yeah, this place. So, there was this boy. This book is about a boy, which is actually the reader, you, if you're reading this, that you're trying to find your friend's grave. And then in chapter 2, well, interestingly, it was in the perspective of a ghost. Well, an invisible ghost. And an unhearable ghost. So, it just makes sense here. And then in chapter 3, the editor, there's like an editor who tries to write a book, sends it to there, and then she slaps on the cheeks 7 times. And she just forgets it in a week. And then the prisoner, well, is sent to his place because he or she, I don't know, had a gun. Well, it depends on who you what you are. And then in chapter 5, the factory girl, it's about like now remembering in the uprising where like there were like some people, the soldiers, ordering you actually factory girls to actually take off their clothes completely. But a lot of people thought that these girls without the clothes would actually mean like no men would actually harm them. But turns out they did. Underwear torn, everything. It's not appropriate for children, so I don't actually know why I'm reading this, but still, I think it's proper for me to know about this because, well, I am a South Korean myself, but this, I think a lot of people would say you should have read this like if you're like 15 or 14 years old in some places, but no, my mom said I can read it right now. I mean, I never knew about these clothes stuff, but still it's pretty much responsible. Without this knowledge, I would have said, whoa, yikes. Without that, know that. And in the epilogue, alright, in the epilogue, there is the writer. The author, in 2013, wrote this part. Well, it explains why she wrote it and that she was 9 years old at the time of the Guangzhou Uprising. And so that's why they moved to Sriri on the outskirts of Seoul. And she was just a few people outside of Guangzhou who knew about the Guangzhou Uprising. Well, back then, that is. But then, it just seems pretty much everything here that we have all of these things to blame for. I mean, it's pretty much obvious why we would have all of this. But even with the graves of the people who died at the Guangzhou Uprising, she finally found this something, a Mangwol Dong gravestone, which she'd seen a long time ago, and I think it just made her some sort of a memory instruction, and then she thought of luck, something to do with luck, and eventually she wrote this book in 2013. And just explains why she wrote the book and how old she was during Guangzhou Uprising, how she knew about the Guangzhou Uprising, and all those stuff, and why she wrote the book especially. And this was written in 2013, so it's pretty much great that we know about this. Probably for this book, nobody except the Koreans might have knew about this, unless the news was spread by some sort of Korean immigrant all the way to the world. But even with this, there's a lot that we still have to talk about. There is still a lot that can't be talked about the Human Acts book, but that will make the video longer than 10 minutes, which I do not actually tolerate here. So I'm guessing that we have to end this video right now. Now, if you found this video anything useful, and if you just got inspired to read this book, I advise you should be at least 11 or 12 if you haven't read this book, because it's pretty much inappropriate as I've read it. But anyways, it's just really short here. I mean, it's less than 228 pages, and so I guess we're in for it. If you want to read this book, then I recommend that you do, because, well, it will understand you with Korean history. And if you don't understand Korean history, well, don't worry. You don't need to understand Korean history. The translated versions and the English versions or the translated versions, everything. There's a few background information in the introduction of the English version. So you already have a background knowledge of the Korean history before you actually read this book. And so, I guess good luck on learning. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did enjoy this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next episode. Click on either of these two boxes so you will watch either of them. See you in one of those boxes. Bye-bye. Jump! Alright, we're done. Yay!